The blue moon of Pandora Prime had not seen rain in 300 cycles. The rivers had become dry. The trees had stopped singing their ancient songs. The animals had fled to the deep caves where the last water still remained. The Na'vi tribe of the Omaticaya had gathered at the base of the great tree, their bodies painted with the sacred white ash of their ancestors. Elder Suti stood at the center of the circle, his old eyes looking up at the dead branches above him. For generations, the Na'vi people had lived in harmony with their world. They had hunted only what they needed. They had planted more than they took. They had spoken to the spirits of the forest and received their blessings. But something had changed. The Great Spirit, the one they called the First Walker, had fallen silent. The connection between the Na'vi and their world had grown weak like a rope that was slowly breaking. The young warriors did not believe in the old stories anymore. They said the Great Spirit was just a tale told to children. They said the dances were meaningless movements that wasted time and energy. But Suti remembered. He remembered when his grandmother had shown him the ancient cave paintings. He remembered the image of a strange being, tall and without a tail, with skin the color of the pale sand. The First Walker. The Great Spirit. The one who had taught the Na'vi everything they knew. Tonight was the night of the triple alignment. The 3 moons of their solar system would form a perfect line in the sky. This happened only once every 1,000 cycles. Suti's grandmother had told him that on such nights, if the sacred dance was performed with pure hearts, the Great Spirit would hear them. The Great Spirit would wake from its long sleep and return to save its children. The drums began to beat. The deep sound echoed through the dead forest like the heartbeat of a dying giant. One by one, the Na'vi warriors stepped into the circle. Their feet began to move in the ancient pattern that had been passed down for countless generations. Left foot forward, right foot to the side. Spin once, touch the ground. Rise up with arms stretched toward the sky. Naderi was among the dancers. She was young, barely past her coming-of-age ceremony, but she felt something that the others did not. As her feet touched the sacred ground, she felt a warmth spreading through her body. It was like standing near a fire on a cold night. Her heart began to beat faster. Her eyes began to glow with an inner light. The other dancers noticed nothing. They moved through the steps mechanically, their minds thinking about the hunt tomorrow or the empty bellies of their children. But Natri danced with her soul. Every movement she made was a prayer. Every step was a promise. She was calling out to something deep beneath the earth, something that had been sleeping for so very long. Miles below the surface of Pandora Prime, in a chamber that no living being had seen for 10,000 years, something stirred. The chamber was made of metal, strange silver metal that the Na'vi had no name for. In the center of this chamber, there was a bed. On the bed lay a figure. It was tall and had no tail. Its skin was pale like sand. It had been sleeping for so long that dust had covered its body like a blanket. The figure was human. His name had once been Commander James Chung of the Earth Colonial Fleet. 10,000 years ago, his ship had crashed on this world. He had been the only survivor. The Na'vi of that time had found him wandering in the forest, wounded and alone. They had never seen a creature like him before. They had watched in amazement as he healed from wounds that would have killed any of their warriors. They had listened in wonder as he spoke of stars that could be visited and machines that could fly through the sky. James had lived among the Na'vi for many years. He had taught them how to read the seasons by watching the stars. He had shown them which plants could heal sickness and which could kill. He had helped them build their first permanent homes in the great trees. And when his body had finally grown too old to continue, he had asked them to place him in the emergency stasis pod from his crashed ship. The pod would keep him alive, he had explained, frozen in time until the day when his people would come to find him. But no rescue ship ever came. Earth had been destroyed by a great war. The human colonies had scattered across the galaxy, forgetting about the lost commander on a distant blue moon. And James had slept on, dreaming of a home that no longer existed. Above him now, the dance continued. Nayeri spun faster and faster. Her feet barely touched the ground. The other dancers had stopped to watch her, their mouths open in amazement. She was glowing. Her entire body was wrapped in blue light that pulsed with the rhythm of her heartbeat. The warmth that Nayeri felt was the stasis pod responding to the dance. The pod had been designed to wake its occupant when certain conditions were met. It was looking for the specific vibration pattern of human footsteps, that the sacred dance of the Na'vi, passed down from the time of the first walker, contained that same pattern. James had taught them this dance himself, knowing that one day they might need to wake him. The ground began to shake. The dead trees groaned and cracked. The Na'vi fell to their knees, crying out in fear. Only Nayeri remained standing, her arms raised to the sky, her eyes closed in concentration. She could feel something rising from below, something powerful, something ancient, something that was neither Na'vi nor animal, but something else entirely. The earth split open at the center of the sacred circle. From the crack, blue light poured out like water from a spring. The stasis pod rose slowly from the ground, carried by mechanical arms that had waited 10,000 years to perform this task. The Na'vi scrambled backward, terrified by what they were seeing. Only Elder Suti remained near the circle, tears streaming down his old face. The pod opened with a hiss of escaping gas. James Chun sat up slowly, his muscles weak from their long sleep. He blinked his eyes, trying to adjust to the moonlight. When he looked around and saw the blue-skinned people watching him with wide eyes, he smiled. They looked different from the Na'vi he had known. Evolution had made them taller, their eyes larger, their tails longer. But they were still his people. They were still the children of those he had loved so long ago. Suti approached the pod and fell to his knees. He pressed his forehead to the ground in the traditional greeting of respect. His voice shook as he spoke the words that had been passed down through his family for generations. These were words in a language that no living Na'vi understood. These were words in English. James listened to the broken phrases, his heart aching with a mixture of joy and sorrow. He placed his hand on the old man's head and helped him rise. His throat was dry from 10,000 years of sleep, but he managed to speak. He spoke in the old Na'vi language, the one that had existed before the changes of time had altered it. The Na'vi gasped. The Great Spirit was speaking to them. The Great Spirit was real. The stories were true. James looked around at the dead forest and felt a deep sadness in his chest. He remembered when these trees had been alive with light and song. He remembered the rivers that had sparkled under the 3 moons. He remembered the animals that had called to each other across the valleys. What had happened to this beautiful world? Nayeri stepped forward. She was still glowing with the blue light, though it was fading now. She told the Great Spirit about the drought. She told him about the dying trees and the empty rivers. She told him about the darkness that had spread across their world over the past 100 cycles. Something was poisoning Pandora Prime, but the Na'vi did not know what it was or how to stop it. James thought for a moment. His mind was still foggy from the long sleep, but his training as a colonial fleet officer was coming back to him. A drought that lasted 300 cycles, trees that stopped producing oxygen, rivers that dried up despite normal rainfall patterns. These were not natural events. Something was disrupting the ecosystem on a massive scale. He asked Nayeri to describe exactly when the changes had started. She told him that her grandmother had first noticed the trees growing silent about 100 cycles ago. Around that same time, strange lights had been seen in the northern mountains. The elders had thought they were just stars falling from the sky, but the lights had continued to appear, night after night, for many weeks. James felt his blood run cold. He knew what those lights meant. Another ship had landed on Pandora Prime. Someone else had found this world. And based on what was happening to the environment, they were not here to make friends. They were here to take everything this world had to offer, regardless of who or what they destroyed in the process. He stood up from the stasis pod, his legs shaking but growing stronger with each passing moment. The Na'vi watched him with a mixture of fear and hope. This strange being, this great spirit from their oldest stories, was awake now. He was standing before them like a figure from legend made real. James looked at Suti and Naderi. He looked at the warriors and hunters gathered around the sacred circle. He looked at the dead trees reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. And he made a decision. He had taught these people how to survive once before. He had given them the knowledge to build a civilization. Now he would teach them something new. He would teach them how to fight. The Na'vi did not know about war. They had never needed to learn. Their world had been peaceful for thousands of years. But James remembered. He remembered the battles he had fought among the stars. He remembered the tactics that had won impossible victories. He remembered what it meant to protect something precious from those who would destroy it. He raised his hand toward the northern mountains. His voice was strong now, carrying across the silent forest like thunder rolling across an empty sky. He spoke of machines and weapons and strategy. He spoke of courage and sacrifice and the duty to protect those who cannot protect themselves. He spoke of humanity's greatest strength, which was not technology or firepower, but the refusal to give up no matter how dark things became. The Na'vi listened. They did not understand all of his words, but they understood his spirit. They understood his determination. They understood that the Great Spirit had returned not to perform miracles, but to stand beside them and fight. Naderi stepped forward and placed her hand on her chest. She pledged her life to the Great Spirit's cause. One by one, the other warriors did the same. Even old Suti raised his fist toward the sky and let out a war cry that echoed through the dead forest. James smiled. These people had called him a god for 10,000 years. They had performed dances in his honor and told stories of his wisdom, but he had never been a god. He was just a man who had crashed on a strange world and found a new family. And now that family needed him. They needed the skills he had brought from the stars. They needed the fighting spirit that had carried humanity across the galaxy. The battle for Pandora Prime was about to begin. And for the first time in 300 cycles, the Na'vi had hope.